24. Demeter's Nature and Deeds. Though the priestess of Demeter, goddess of the cornfield, initiate brides and bridegrooms into the secrets of the couch, she has no husband of her own. While still young and gay, she bore Cor and the lusty Acus to Zeus, her brother, out of wedlock. She also bore Plutus to the Titan Iasus, or Ision, with whom she fell in love at the wedding of Cadmus and Harmonia. Inflamed by the nectar which flowed like water at the feast, the lovers slipped out of the house and lay together openly in a thrice-plowed field. On the return, Zeus, guessing from their demeanor and the mud on their arms and legs what they had been at, and enraged that Iaeus should have dared to touch Demeter, struck him dead with a thunderbolt. But some say that Iaeus was killed by his brother Dardanus, or torn to pieces by his own horses. B. Demeter herself was a gentle soul, and Erysichthon, son of Tropas, was one of the few men with whom she ever dealt harshly. At the head of 20 companions, Erysichthon dared invade a grove which the Pelaglacians had planted for her at Dautium, and began cutting down the sacred trees to prove timber for his new banqueting hall. Demeter assumed the form of Nisipe, princess of the grove, and mildly ordered Erysichthon to desist. It was only when he threatened her with his axe that she revealed himself in splendor and condemned him to suffer perpetual hunger, however much he might eat. Back he went to dinner and gorged all day at his parents' expense, growing hungrier and thinner the more he ate, until they could no longer afford to keep him supplied with food, and he became a beggar on the streets, eating filth. Contrawise, on Pandarius the Cretan, who stole Zeus's gold dog and thus avenged her for the killing of Iaeus, Demeter bestowed the royal gift of never suffering from the bellyache. C. Demeter lost her gaiety forever when young Cor, afterwards called Persephone, was taken from her. Hades fell in love with Cor and went to ask Zeus's leave to marry her. Zeus feared to offend his eldest brother by a downright refusal, but knew also that Demeter would not forgive him if Cor were committed to Tartarus. He therefore answered politically that he could neither give nor withhold his consent. This emboldened Hades to abduct the girl as she was picking flowers in a meadow. It may have been a Sicilian Enna, or at Attic Colonus, or at Hermine, or somewhere in Crete, or near Pisa, or near Lerna, or beside Acadian Phanis, or at Boeotian Nysa, or anywhere else in the widely separated regions which Demeter visited in her wandering search for Cor. But her own priests say that it was at Eleusis. She sought Cor without rest for 9 days and nights, neither eating nor drinking, and calling fruitlessly all the while. The only news she could get came from old Hecate, who early one morning had heard Cor crying, "A rape, a rape," but on hurrying to the rescue found no sign of her. D. On the 10th day, after a disagreeable encounter with Poseidon among the herds of Oncus, Demeter came in disguise to Eleusis, where King Celis and his wife Metaneira entertained her hospitably, and she was invited to remain a wet nurse to Demophon, the newly born prince. The lame daughter Iam tried to console Demeter with comically lascivious verses, and the dry nurse, old Bau, persuaded her to drink barley water by a jest. She groaned as if in a travail, and unexpectedly produced from beneath her skirt Demeter's own son, Iacchus, who leaped into his mother's arms and kissed her. E. "Oh, how greedily you drink," cried Abus, an elder son of Celis's, as Demeter gulped the pitcherful of barley water, which was flavored with mint. Demeter threw him a grim look, and he was metamorphed into a lizard. Somewhat ashamed of herself, Demeter now decided to do Celis's service by making Demophon immortal. That night she held him over the fire to burn away his mortality. Metaneria, who was the daughter of Amphikiton, happened to enter the hall before the process was complete and broke the spell. So Demeter died. Mine is an unlucky house, Celis complained, weeping at the fate of his 2 sons, and thereafter was called Disolus. Dry your tears, Disolus, said Demeter. You still have 3 sons, including Triptolemus, on whom I intend to confer such great gifts that you will forget your double loss. F. For Triptolemus, who herded his father's cattle, had recognized Demeter and given her the news she needed. 10 days before, his brothers Eumolpus, a shepherd, and Eubulus, a swineherd, had been out in the fields feeding their beasts when the earth suddenly gaped open, engulfing Eubulus's swine before his very eyes. Then, with a heavy thud of hooves, a chariot drawn by black horses appeared and dashed down the chasm. The chariot driver's face was invisible, but his right arm was tightly clasped around a shrieking girl. Eumolpus had been told of the event by Eubulus and made it the subject for a lament. G. Armed with this evidence, Demeter summoned Hecate. Together they approached Helios, who sees everything, and forced him to admit that Hades had been the villain, doubtless with the connivance of his brother Zeus. Demeter was so angry that instead of returning to Olympus, she continued to wander about the earth, forbidding the trees to yield fruit and the herbs to grow, until the race of men stood in danger of extinction. Zeus, ashamed to visit Demeter in person at Eleusis, sent her first a message by Iris, of which she took no notice, and then a deputation of the Olympian gods with conciliatory gifts, begging her to reconcile to his will. But she would not return to Olympus and swore that the earth must remain barren until Kor had been restored. H. Only one course of action remained for Zeus. He sent Hermes with a message to Hades. If you do not restore Kor, we are all undone. And with another to Demeter. You may have your daughter again on the single condition that she has not yet tasted the food of the dead. I. Because Kor had refused to eat so much as a crust of bread ever since her abduction, Hades was obliged to cloak his vexation, telling her mildly, My child, you seem to be unhappy here, and your mother weeps for you. I have therefore decided to send you home. J. Kor's tears ceased to flow, and Hermes helped her to mount his chariot. But just as she was setting off for Eleusis, one of Hades' gardeners by name Ascalaphus began to cry and hoot derisively. Having seen the Lady Kor, he said, Pick a pomegranate from a tree in your orchard and eat 7 seeds. I am ready to bear witness that she has tasted the food of the dead. Hades grinned and told Ascalaphus to perch on the back of Hermes' chariot. K. At Eleusis, Demeter joyfully embraced Kor, but on hearing about the pomegranate, grew more dejected than ever and said again, I will neither return to Olympus nor remove my curse from the land. Zeus then persuaded Rhea, the mother of Hades, Demeter, and himself to plead with her, and a compromise was at last reached. Kor should spend 3 months of the year in Hades' company as Queen of Tartarus with the title of Persephone, and the remaining 9 in Demeter's. Hecate offered to make sure that this arrangement was kept and to keep constant watch on Kor. L. Demeter finally consented to return home. Before leaving Eleusis, she instructed Triptolemus, Eumolpus, and Celis, together with Diocles, king of Phera, who had been assiduously searching for Kor all this while in her worship and mysteries. But she punished Asclepius for his tale-bearing by pushing him down a hole and covering it with an enormous rock, from which he was finally released by Hercules, and then she changed him into a short-eared owl. She also rewarded the Phoenicians of Arcadia, in whose house she rested after Poseidon had outraged her, with all kinds of grain, but forbade them to sow beans. One Chimates was the first who dared to do so. He has a shrine by the river Cephisus. M. Triptolemus she supplied with seed corn, a wooden plow, and a chariot drawn by serpents, and sent him all over the world to teach mankind the art of agriculture. But first she gave him lessons on the Rharan plain, which is why some call him the son of King Rarus, and to Phytalus, who had treated her kindly on the banks of the Cephisus. She gave a fig tree, the first ever seen in Attica, and taught him how to cultivate it. Hold on. Yeah, I'm going to do the footers tomorrow. That's it.